Did you know that some historians argue that the Montenegrin Uprising from 1941 was the first major uprising against the Axis powers? During the First World War, Montenegro sided with Serbia and was swiftly overrun by the Austro-Hungarians in 1916. In 1918, the country was liberated by the Entente. The in 1917 signed Corfu Declaration foreshadowed the unification of Montenegro with Serbia, which happened in December 1918. The new state would become part of the new kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, later Yugoslavia. This led to the Christmas Uprising the following year, where Montenegrin whites fought against Montenegrin Greens. The whites were unionists who advocated a centralist Yugoslavia. The Greens supported the house of Petrović-Njegoš of Montenegro over the house of Karađorđević of Serbia. They weren't necessarily against a Yugoslav state, but wanted Montenegro to maintain its own identity and not be ruled by Serbs. However, the rebellion was crushed. Insurrection occurred till 1929. On the 25th of March 1941, Yugoslavia signed the Tripartite Pact to join the Axis powers. Hitler wanted to use the country's railway network to capture Greece. Then, on the 27th of March, Serbian military leaders seized power in a military coup in Belgrade, denounced Regent Paul and put the 17-year-old Peter on the throne. Hitler then vowed to destroy Yugoslavia. In April 1941, the Axis invasion of Yugoslavia took place. The kingdom was taken down in 12 days. Yugoslavia was then partitioned. Let's take a look at what happened to Montenegro. It came almost fully under Italian control, but the type of control varied. Parts of eastern Montenegro were annexed into Italian-held Albania. This was due to the many Albanians that populated the region. In the north, an area was added from Serbia. The area around the naval base of Kotor and Split was added to Zadar, which was already in Italian hands, and formed three discontinuous provinces of Cattaro, Spalato and Zara, all under the governorate of Dalmatia, part of the Kingdom of Italy. Montenegro, along with Albania and the annexed part of Dalmatia, was a stepping stone into the Central Balkans, and the adjacent Bay of Kotor was to serve as the base for the Italian navy guarding the southern Adriatic. From an economic point of view, however, Montenegro was a burden from the start. Occupied Montenegro relied on food import, and the extraction and exploitation of minerals was yet to be developed. When the Italians marched in, they were greeted by separatists who formed a committee for the liberation of Montenegro. The Italians were assisted by collaborator Sekula Drjević. As we saw in other Italian administrated regions, initially the Italians were friendly and lenient. However, soon the dissatisfaction arose. There was an influx of 25,000 refugees. Most of them came from Croatia. Montenegro lost territory to other occupiers, there were economic problems, and the Italians actually had reason to worry, because many former Yugoslav army officers came from this region, and on top of all that, the Communist Party of Montenegro was pretty big. The Italians were shocked when, in July 1941, a massive revolt occurred. Reasons for this uprising was that collaborator Sekula Drjević wanted to create an Axis-aligned puppet state. Drjević had organized his Montenegrin separatists, known as the Greens, against Montenegrin Chetniks as well as partisans. Later served the Croatian Ustaša and administered the Axis-run Belgrade concentration camp at Zajmište. A day after the new state's inauguration, July 13, 1941, both Montenegrin Chetniks and Montenegrin partisans led a massive uprising against the new state, a demonstration that would catch the attention of both London and Washington. See, Drjević made a critical error of judgment. He thought his fellow Montenegrins would go along with the idea, but this was not the case. The notion of Montenegro being closely linked to Italy meant for many it was not going to be more than a vassal state. And even those who desperately supported the Italians soon found their reasons to be dissatisfied. Weapons were at the ready, because many Montenegrins served in the Royal Yugoslav Army, and after the campaign the Axis invasion was over, they just went home with their equipment. And despite this small country being so politically and ideologically divided, their hatred against the Italians would unite them. Now, there were a lot of communists in the region, and many historians believe that they were the driving force behind the uprising. Historian Kenneth Morrison, who wrote the book Montenegro, A Modern History, wrote the following about it. The Communist Party was strong in Montenegro, but while many historians have credited the communists with starting the uprising, what became known as the 13th of July Uprisings was a genuinely popular uprising, a people's uprising motivated more by Montenegrin pride and freedom than by communist or any other ideology. Now, do notice that the communists did play a significant role in carrying out the revolt. Now, before the events took place, the Communist Party of Yugoslavia saw Montenegro as a fertile ground to launch an armed struggle against the Axis occupiers. They sent Milovan Djilas, a Montenegrin, to organize this. Djilas was aware of the division within Montenegrin society. He remembered the events of the 1918 Christmas uprising and the ensuing civil war. Upon arriving in the region, he noticed the general satisfaction among different factions with the Italian occupiers. Their collective resentment would be fuel for the uprising as momentum was building independently. And on July 13th, one day after the proclamation of this independent Montenegrin kingdom, communist armed villagers and soldiers of the former Royal Yugoslav Army launched their revolt. The first attacks occurred in Cetinje and its surroundings. What started as small-scale attacks soon spread through the country and the rebellion took a life of its own. 1 week later, most of Montenegro, except for some key towns, was under rebel control. That summer, the resistance fighters were in control of many other key towns. The speed and efficiency of the uprising shocked the Italians and emboldened the communists even more. But the Italians, they struck back. They dropped their lenient approach and resorted to harsh draconic measures. Martial law and curfews were introduced, and violent reprisals as well as the confiscation of firearms occurred. And as the Italians began to take back territory, cracks within the Montenegrin resistance began to emerge. Different factions within the resistance occurred as a result of the summer uprising. Late 1941, the communists, who by now had named themselves the Partisans, conducted a second stage. Partisan leader Tito replaced Milovan Djilas by Ivan Milutinovic. The Partisans took back some territory but proceeded to settle old scores with perceived enemies, collaborators, fifth columnists, or class enemies. Many Montenegrins were appalled by the communist atrocities and then turned to the more nationalist factions, asking them to protect their villages against partisan attacks, raids, looting, arson, as well as the execution of alleged traitors. In post-war literature, these communist atrocities are known as the mistakes of the left or the leftist errors. Such arbitrary justice, characterized by events such as the slaughter at a site near Kolashin, dubbed the Dogs' Graveyard, served only to weaken the communists and bolster support for opposing nationalist groups, both green and white. These were not the only mistakes the communists made. Late December 1941, they attacked a heavily fortified Italian garrison and suffered huge losses. Many more partisans would perish over the course of the war. Early 1942, Colonel Bajo Stanisic, one of the leaders of the Montenegro Uprising, proclaimed they would fight against the partisans from now on. The partisan Red Terror made people join the Chetniks, but the Chetnik partisan split was also caused by the draconic measures of the Axis occupiers. So what started as a united uprising on the 13th of July 1941 and the first people's uprising against occupation in Europe ended in a more fractured and divided resistance movement and a harsher occupation. An order of the military governor of January 12, 1941 specified the reprisals. For every Italian officer killed or wounded, 50 civilians would be shot, and for every non-commissioned officer or private killed or wounded, 10 civilians would be shot. And this led to a split in the Yugoslav resistance. The nationalist Serbian-oriented forces, the Chetniks, who were led by Draza Mihailovic, and the communist-oriented forces, the partisans, who were led by Joseph Broz Tito. At some point, Chetnik leader Draza Mihailovic came to the conclusion that the communist partisans were the main enemy and not the Axis forces. And what we see happen then is that Chetnik forces started to collaborate with the Italian occupiers to destroy the partisans. The Italians wanted to use the Chetniks for law and order. The Chetniks wanted to use the Italians to crush the partisans. As the war progressed, the partisans gained the upper hand and eventually defeated the Axis powers as well as the Chetniks. If you want to learn more about the Chetniks, check out this video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.